Hi guys and welcome back. Today I want to talk about exploring new mediums, new techniques. I I've realized, I've come to the conclusion that I'm very bored with the way that I approach my traditional artwork. I have a very set technique and I sit down and I do it, and I essentially know how it's going to end up in the end. Sometimes I have some that are total failures, but I never have any that are breakout successes, ones that I feel like I've figured something out or it just looks amazing in a new way that I didn't expect. I'm never surprised in a good way. I'm always surprised in a bad way, or I just expect what's going to happen. So, I want to change that. There's one main way that I'm going to approach this, how I want to handle my mediums. But really the key is just I know that I miss that feeling when I was younger, when I didn't have one specific set of mediums and one very specific style. I was exploring and I was learning, so I would create all sorts of pieces of artwork, and some worked, some really didn't work, and a lot of them it felt like magic as I was learning how to get better at it, and I was seeing these new techniques that oftentimes happen by accident. The exploration was just, it was thrilling, it was exciting. That was what made art so addicting at the beginning, and I miss that. I miss the unknown and the spontaneity. I miss that that discovery process that can come from it. So I have a theory. I would like to explore it and see if it turns out to be true. So I think that what I'm going to do for this problem to shake me out of it is I want to incorporate different tangential mediums into my workflow that I do know that I already like. So I know that I like paints that are essentially wash based. So watercolors, inks, that kind of thing. They're transparent, you layer them, and I really like that. And I add water to it. That's how I thin it out. And I have tried opaque paints. I enjoy them, but I don't think they're going to be my bread and butter. So my theory is that incorporating even just like the smallest new medium will add a challenge. So from the very beginning, I have to be thinking, how am I going to incorporate this medium so that I can utilize it well, so that it can feel like it belongs in that painting and not just an afterthought. And I am hoping that this will keep me on my toes. It'll help me to just like be in the moment of art making, of making marks on the paper with the tools that I'm using, and enjoy that process again. So a few examples that I have thought of that I definitely want to try is I want to use colored pencils with my watercolors. There are so many artists that do this so well. There's lots of artists that use it as their like line work or to simply define edges. And I'd like to try that. I'd like to play with the watercolors and the colored pencils in a few different ways to try to get different effects. So that's one that's on my list. I am playing with all inks today, and I'll talk a bit more about that, but that is something that I knew I loved, but I haven't done for a while, and I haven't done it in this particular combination of colors and techniques and all that. But anyways, inks is something that I would like to explore because they are a bit different from watercolors. They bring different things to the table and leave other things behind that watercolor does. Those are the two main ones, the two big ones. And I really, really want to get back to my roots as far as line work. So I have said this before. I do not like the execution of using acrylic gouache for the line work, but I like the final effect. So it allows me to, whatever, I don't need to dig into the details of line work, but the current medium that I use to create line work, which is one of my absolute favorite features in my art, is something that I only like the finished product of, but I don't like creating it. And that I think is a big missing piece to me feeling fully engaged with a piece. So I want to be able to create a piece that my favorite step can be something that I also love doing again. I used to love doing the line work, and then I changed mediums to try to enhance that. Anyways, this is a lot ramblier than I meant for it to be. The point is that that's one of the things that I'd like to really try to focus on, is creating lines in a way that feels fun, that feels like that satisfying process. So I think the pencils could provide that, and inking with, even with brushes, like even that still is a step closer to what I enjoy. Is that I want to incorporate mediums that I have not tried or moved away from, that I'm interested in, but in a way that they're still subordinate to a core technique that I feel comfortable with. And I think that that's key for this kind of exploration, for me at least in my past experiences, so that I don't feel totally burnt on the process, or like I'm a complete failure and I can't get it to work. When I have completely tried something new, which I am not saying don't do this. This is obviously a very great thing to do, to try something completely fresh and new. That could add so much newness to your work. But for me, I found that it can be very frustrating and challenging in a way that doesn't feel like growth. But if I use something that I can like anchor myself to, that I can say, okay, I've got this in the painting and I know how to do that. So I'm going to make sure that I nail that, and then I can add in these new techniques or add in this new medium and then play with that. And that part can be somewhere that I am uncertain, but this part can be kind of the solid foundation for the painting. Anyways, that's what I think will be the key for me being able to enjoy this process, move forward, and also move forward towards a goal that I'm excited about, a final painting style that I enjoy making and also enjoy the final. Ultimately, that's what I've realized. I love how they end up looking, but I don't love the process that it takes to get there, and I would like to find a happy medium between both. So let's talk a bit about what I'm actually doing today. So this painting is all inks, and I mentioned that earlier, but it's all India ink. I have used the black ink before a lot, actually. It's my favorite ink. It's a Dr. P.H. Martin Black Star Matte waterproof ink. Love it. I've used it for most of my Inktovers in the past. Love creating washes with ink. It's just, it feels different from watercolors, and I will talk about that, some of the differences, but anyways, that's what today is. It's all that ink, and I've incorporated some India ink that's blue. So that's something that is new to me, is that I've never actually really attempted to utilize colored ink, especially in this kind of form where it's very monochromatic. That's also a bit of a challenge, where it's only two black and blue, and it's a slightly new medium. It was really fun. I will say that. I really loved this. I loved that it did feel like a breath of fresh air, even though it looks like such a similar process to what I normally do, but it felt so different and so alive. So some of the differences between India ink and watercolors, at least from like my experience of using them to create a painting, is that India ink is waterproof. So once it's dry, it's not going to budge at all, which I love. I adore that quality in it. So what that means is that I can create washes and I know that it's going to stay exactly how I put it. With watercolors, obviously it's reactivatable with water. So there's a certain amount of staining of the pigments sticking to the paper, but when you create glazes on top of it, I have found that almost always there's some form of shifting of the paint below it, of the wash that I've already done. So if I've done like a specific pattern or shadows on top of like the base layer, that can get muddled very easily, or it can soften the edge if I glaze on top of it. But with the inks, I know it's going to be there. I know it's going to stay. It allows me to be a little bit more in the moment rather than having to think through every step, every layer that is going to go into an area, and then having to think through, okay, well, I can't do that step yet because it needs to be the final, because it needs to be the sharpest. So I have to wait to do that, and then I have to build it up in a different way. And it can often feel less intuitive to get to the final result. And I don't like that. I don't like that it feels like I have to kind of walk on eggshells around what I've already put down. I have really, really enjoyed being able to just rely on the ink to stay where I put it. And that's a big part too about the line work, is that once I put the line work down, it is there. It's not going to bleed or wash out or anything like that. And even the acrylic gouache, I still have to be a little bit careful. It's a lot more sturdy than watercolors, but I still give it a little bit of space. I don't scrub at it. I have accidentally scrubbed away those lines before. So anyways, that's a big one. Waterproof. I've also found that it's more homogeneous in the way that the washes settle. So you can absolutely get texturing, especially if it's intentional. And I love creating very textured washes with my inks. But if you're going for a very smooth, gradiated, the opposite of gradiated, a very smooth, consistent wash, the particles of the ink tend to be very consistent in that whole wash. And I like being able to have the level of control that I'm looking for. So with watercolors, there's a great variation between very granulating and fairly clean. I'm not really sure what the opposite word for granulating is. So very consistent watercolors. But there's still, I found, a little bit where you can see those pigments will pool a little bit differently on the paper. You can see that there's a little bit of separation. That is absolutely something that is desirable if you're seeking that out, if you want that in your work. I found that I've dabbled in that. I definitely enjoy granulating watercolors in the right moment, but I think that like overall 90% of what I want to put down, I want it to be consistent. So I am really gravitating more towards that quality of the inks, is that I can have that consistent layer down. And I can use the same inks to create the line work. The downside to that is that essentially it has to be very dark. If I want it to have the appearance at least of opaqueness to cover up any any issues, any mistakes in the background, or just like the untidiness of the edges, I do need to have it very dark, which is a benefit for the acrylic wash. I can lighten it and I can have really light line work, and that allows me to be a lot more dimensional with my choices. But I can still use the same inks that I'm creating my washes with, so it's extremely harmonious. It's like 1-to-1. I take the same medium and then I create the line work and it is the same color. Whereas with the watercolors and the acrylic wash, they are different mediums and they have very different qualities. So it can often be a little bit more, or it really is a little bit more challenging to color match the two to make sure that it has the harmonious quality that I'm looking for. So I love that. I can use the inks with a dip pen to create the line work. I'm going to play with that more. I'd love to show a little bit more of like the process as I learn that a little better. But anyways, those are some of the like main key things that I found that are different with the inks. And I would definitely say that the experiment in this painting was a success. I enjoyed the process. I felt present with it as I was trying to figure out how to work with the inks, how to work in a very limited color palette. That was also another challenge that was added to it. Yeah, I loved it. I really loved it. I loved using the inks. That was a big one. They're just, it feels like there is this very subtle difference that is noticeable, that I did notice and I did enjoy. So I will be doing more ink artwork in the short term for sure. Yeah. So that just, it encourages me to try out new experiments, different supplies. My watercolor colored pencil challenge thing that will be coming soon for myself at least. And then hopefully I'll be able to show you guys a bit of that process. And yeah, that's it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching. This original painting is available at my shop. There's a link down in the description if you'd like to give her a new home. And she is the print for July for Patreon. So if you sign up by the last day of July, you will get a print of her, which is exclusive. It's the only way to get it. And that link is also down in the description as well. And of course, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my patrons over on Patreon. You guys are incredible. Like, I truly cannot thank you enough for supporting me and my artwork. I'm so grateful for all of you. So anyways, that is it for today. I am very excited to show you guys what I've been working on. That's coming in the next video. I can actually show you what we're moving into as the year progresses, but that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.